Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, US counter-extremism efforts need the involvement of Muslim communities. Well, that is according to President Barack Obama, a claim that's kicked off a contentious debate. So here on the stream, we love to think of new ways of you joining in the conversation. We have a brand new one, early adopters. Pay attention, Malika Bilal, the digital producer of the stream. What are you holding?
Right, I'm holding the iPad, and that's because I'm multitasking today. So
okay, very good.
People can go out and get the stream's brand new app. You can go to our website to see the location on your screen there, stream.aljazeera.com, and download it for your tablet or your phone. And today you can answer our debate question, answer yes or no on the tablet, or you can send us a tweet the way you usually do. Just make sure you use that hashtag AJStream.
So joining our conversation right here in the studio, we have Arsalan Sulman, and Arsalan is President Obama's acting special envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation, also known as OIC. Arsalan, it's good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad that President Obama could spare you to be in the stream today. We will hear what you have to say in just a moment. Sit tight.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm in the stream.
US President Barack Obama says that the fight against violent extremism is a generational challenge that needs the cooperation of law enforcement, educators, religious leaders and governments. Now, speaking last week at the White House Summit on countering violent extremism, President Obama stressed the importance of working with Muslims.
If we're going to solve these issues, then the people who are most targeted and potentially most affected, Muslim Americans, have to have a seat at the table where they can help shape and strengthen these partnerships so that we're all working together to help communities stay safe and strong and resilient.
But some Muslim Americans have been reluctant to work with law enforcement because they feel that they've been unfairly targeted. To help us talk about this, we're also joined by Ahmed Yunus. He's an adjunct assistant professor at Chapman University. He's also a member of the Los Angeles delegation that gave a presentation at the CVE Summit. Shahid Amanullah is co-founder of Affinis Labs, an incubator for startups to support social impact and national security. And Hina Shamsi is director of the National Security Project at the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU. Great to have you here everybody. Ahmed Yunus, when you got the invitation to this Countering Violent Extremism Summit at the White House, what is it that you thought you were going to be joining in?
An opportunity to communicate to other pilot city delegations, primarily composed of Muslim American leaders, what it is that we've done here in Southern California, what our LA framework looks like, what kind of conversations we've had, what kind of tugs back and forth substantively we've had on language, and to be able to learn from other communities and other law enforcement agencies partnering with communities, what it is that their communities look like, the vast diversity of Muslim American life, so that we can apply smarter approaches to protecting our community.
You sound extremely upbeat about this.
Well, I'm blessed to be upbeat about most things, but I should tell you that, you know, right after 9/11, I was one of the folks that was working very hard in Washington to get the President of the United States to speak even one sentence of what President Obama said in his speech during the summit. And I must say that I do feel that there has been a great shift in the discourse on Muslim Americans, and I think that this summit and the President's courage have contributed to such.
Right, so Hina, you probably got a similar invitation. How did the invitation get to you, and when you opened it, what did you think?
Well, our invitation came relatively late. We have long raised concerns about this CVE approach, and those concerns arise from a few different reasons. One, as President Obama himself said at the summit, there is no way to predict who's going to become radicalized or not. Two, there is no fact-based evidence for CVE, and 3, significant set of concerns that this approach is going to be counterproductive and ineffective by stigmatizing American Muslims without providing crucial civil liberties safeguards and privacy safeguards to protect their interests. And these safeguards are necessary because of the kinds of abuses that we have seen federal, state, and local law enforcement carrying out.
So, Hina, you still went though. I mean, it sounds like there were 3 good reasons for you maybe not to be that engaged, but yet you went. Because why?
Well, absolutely. And I will say that certain community leaders ended up declining the invitation. For us, it was important to go to see the extent to which our concerns were or were not addressed and seek to engage with the administration further in order to ensure that they would be addressed.
There are some concerns coming into us online, several of them. I'm going to read 2 of them, Arsalan. This is from Hind, and she says, why was there no focus on right-wing / white power terror groups and their incredibly easy access to guns in America? And echoing that sentiment really is this person who says, we don't expect moderate Christians to be involved with government counter-terror strategies regarding, as an example, the KKK here. It's a double standard. So we saw a lot of criticism, Arsalan, from people saying, why the need for a summit and why target one community in particular?
Right. Well, I mean, we definitely hear those concerns. And the summit wasn't targeting one community in particular, and it wasn't focusing on one type of violent extremism. I think in the discussions, a lot of different factors and a lot of different faces of violent extremism were discussed. But in terms of the Muslim American community in particular, we are seeing that with groups like ISIS or Daesh and even Al-Qaeda, they are focusing on the American Muslim community and Muslim communities around the world as targets for recruitment. So we consider these groups as predators, right? They're preying on young Muslims in different parts of the world, and they're seeking to recruit them to their ideology and their cause. So the Muslim American community, not only are they facing this external threat, but they're also facing, as you mentioned, potential threats from groups domestically, whether they are individuals who may commit hate crimes or who may have a view of the Muslim American community which is not welcoming. But from this dual threat, the approach that the CVE programs are taking is one of engaging with the community and having community-led solutions to the problems. We want to establish very good working relationships between law enforcement, between the communities, so that not only can we address these outside threats coming from these predator groups like ISIS, but we can also address the internal threats that these communities may be facing from individuals who may be perpetrating or may be thinking about perpetrating hate crimes.
Ahmed, what did you want to add?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of the mythology around CVE is problematic. There was a lot of discourse about KKK, white supremacy groups, non-stater groups. We were engaging with someone at the DOJ who prosecuted the Olympic bombings in Atlanta. That part is not true. The fact that there's a radicalization theory that underscores CVE is not true. The idea that CVE started with ISIS is not true. I myself, as a very young activist, used to engage the local FBI office here in Southern California long before 9/11 as a part of our community engagement. What we need to, I think, focus on is that Muslims have been arguing to be a part of the solution for a very long time. And their stigmatization has not come pursuant to the Obama administration's support of their efforts. Rather, it's due to the actions of those who claim that Islam articulates the backing for their work. And what we need to understand, I think, with all due respect to the importance of the ACLU and other Muslim advocate type institutions, is that integration into the American fabric requires for us to appreciate the great diversity of American Muslim life and to amplify the voices, even if we disagree with some of them sometimes, of those institutions and individuals that represent an authentic approach to attempting to solve very complex problems. And I would hope that the ACLU and other groups would contribute to our success as opposed to serve as a detriment to our progress at this very critical juncture.
Shahid.
Yeah.
So no one...
Let me just bring Shahid into the conversation here, and then we'll get right back to you.
Yeah,
Shahid,
no,
go ahead.
absolutely. I believe we've been stuck in this cycle for quite a while, and as somebody who's both been involved with Muslim identity formation on the outside of government, but also someone who for 3 years was working as a senior advisor at the State Department specifically to do CVE-style projects from within government, I think we need to kind of break it out of this framework that we're in. I think Muslim Americans and young Muslims generally around the world are in a much better position actually to deal with the problem. Extremism is the symptom of the problem. The problem is greater problems about Muslim identity and lifestyle among young people around the world. And I'm trying to create a way that Muslims can really lead this, not just as a charity kind of thing, but as a for-profit, market-driven way to really create a base that expresses Muslim identity, that builds confidence, that builds real solutions to these that are perpetual, that are self-sufficient, and that pull us away from this relationship with law enforcement that Hina finds problematic. For example, I personally believe that our relationship with law enforcement should be that of any community in law enforcement, which is when we see something that is an infraction of the law, we report it, right? And what does that mean? That means that we need to then really take the leadership of creating institutions, businesses, etc., that address the larger issue. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
So Hina, if I understand Ahmed correctly, he's saying that maybe the ACLU could be a little bit more supportive as opposed to being critical. How would you respond to that?
Well, let's just be very clear about where the areas of agreement and disagreement are. No one's arguing against integration. No one's arguing against communities engaging with law enforcement, not at all. To the contrary. Rather, our set of concerns are when law enforcement, when government looks at any particular community, and here it is the American Muslim community, because even though there was lip service given to other communities, virtually the entire focus of the summit itself and CVE so far has been on American Muslims. The concern is securitizing the relationship between government and American Muslims so that it is stigmatizing American Muslims as requiring monitoring, reporting of themselves to law enforcement and of each other.
So Hina, take a breath for a moment, because I just want Arsene wanted to come here because he wanted to answer these concerns. Yeah, just hold tight for everybody 1 minute. Everybody wants to chat, but let me just go to Arsene first of all. Stigmatizing Muslim Americans, targeting Muslim Americans, Hina said, like, even though you said it was an open forum, it wasn't.
No, it was an open forum, and I think Ahmed's response, clarifies that. But in addition, I think the points that Ahmed and Shahid were talking about, it gets to the issue of how people look at the relationship between government and communities. When you look at government engaging with communities, one individual might think that, oh, the government is targeting this community and stigmatizing them, and the other might say, well, this is great. You're engaging them, and you're treating the Muslim American community like you would treat any other community in the country. So
is it about tone? Is it about pride? How do you get that right?
It's about looking at the community as a source of solutions and not a source of problems. And the president's remarks on Wednesday addressed this point directly. He said that these programs must not stigmatize the community. They must not,
Did you write
people
the
must not
remarks?
be, no, absolutely not.
Who wrote the president's remarks?
Well, the president's the best speechwriter in the White House, absolutely.
Right, but he obviously has some help. I mean, Ahmed, you were saying that you helped the president get his language right. So somebody like yourself, or maybe Shahed, is helping him get the right tone. Correct?
The difference between the life we're living today and the life we lived 15 years ago is that there are senior Muslims that work in all aspects of government. There are people that engage with Muslim American communities that work in government that are very competent in their ability to write these things. I'd like to address the civil rights concern. I myself am the person that raised civil rights challenges on behalf of youth voices in the Muslim American community.
Can we be explicit for our international audience? The civil rights challenges, the civil liberties challenges are what? Let's be explicit.
The use of informants. Oh, sure. The use of informants, the targeting of Muslim American communities, the wiretapping of student groups, all actions that have been done by law enforcement in American history, as acknowledged by the president and as acknowledged by law enforcement in our delegation, have been extremely problematic. And I raised these concerns in the meeting with Vice President Biden.
And what did the Vice President Biden say?
Absolutely. I mean, there is an absolute acknowledgement across this administration that there are very serious challenges to the way that law enforcement has engaged with Muslim American communities throughout the country, and there needs to be a change. That securitizing language, that is Obama's language. That is not the ACLU's language. And it's so important for us to appreciate this moment in Muslim American history that yields for us an opportunity to engage, yes, in very complex sometimes problematic realities that require transparency and require our full capacity as communities and allies of communities.
All right,
and that's why I think what Shahid
guess
is
we'll take a
doing
breath
is
for a moment, because I want to go to the community here. I hear you talking about big, broad engagement and Muslim Americans. I'm hearing big, broad things. I'm not hearing exactly what you are talking about. I would love to hear that. I know the community will take the lead. Malika.
They will. Well, one person is picking up on what Ahmed was just saying about transparency, and some online are saying there's not enough of that. So Darakshan here on Twitter, she created a hashtag against the summit called CVE Speak Out. She says, CVE is profiling in practice. Law enforcement targets entire subsets of Muslim communities, and it views them through a security lens. So we heard the pushback already from Ahmed for that. So I want to move this on a little bit with this tweet from Glenn. He was a participant, and he says there were some handpicked Muslims who mimicked government talking points. There were no questions allowed, and there was some conversation. He gets pushback online from Anne, who's from Australia. She was also at the summit, and she says Muslim leaders had an active voice at the summit. They weren't lectured to. They did have a conversation. So Shahid, what did that conversation involve?
Well, actually,
what concrete came out of it?
There were several of us inside the summit that actually had the hashtag Open CVE Summit, because we were trying to it was our responsibility to be transparent to those who were outside the summit, to let them know what the conversations that were happening. So I was tweeting pictures of statistics. People were talking about the questions they were raising. People were talking about some of the points that were being brought up that addressed some of the concerns that were coming from the outside. I absolutely believe that for those of us who get invited to these things, we have a responsibility to speak back to the public so that they understand what's going on and so that we don't have these misunderstandings.
So solutions that came out of this conversation, this engagement with the White House and with some Muslim Americans from around the United States, can you share one?
I'll tell you honestly, as someone who did this within government and outside of government, the less that government is involved in confronting extremism, frankly, the better. And this is not that government doesn't have the right motives or they have the money or whatever, but by inserting themselves into this discourse, they play into extremist hands. They complicate matters. But that requires the communities to stand up, because the government has a responsibility to keep people safe and to address these. They can't simply say, well, we're not good at this, so we're just not going to do anything. So what that requires is people like myself and others to actually drive community-led solutions that are true solutions, not security
So you're
solutions.
telling Arslan that the next time he thinks to put together a summit that he shouldn't ask you, he shouldn't put the summit together? What are you saying?
No, the summit is useful to get people together so that we can have a conversation and be on the same page and communicate concerns. That's absolutely the case. But I'm calling upon people to actually start driving solutions. If Muslim communities want to be part of the solution, they need to step up and do that. And I think there's enough talent and money and resources and concern among Muslim communities around the world to do this. And the more that we do this, the less the government is going to feel the need to securitize Muslims, the less they're going to feel the need to target Muslims.
Yeah.
And that will be part of that conversation.
Hina.
You know, this is reminding me a little bit of the frustrations I had with the summit and the frustrations I have with some of these conversations around it, which is that we don't tend to have a uniform set of understandings about what exactly the problem is. In the United States, the problem of some Islamic ideological violence, as some call it, is minuscule. The greater problem here with respect to ideological violence is from right-wing extremists or militias. In the United States, the greater problem that American communities have faced have been with abusive law enforcement practices, suspicious activity reporting that singles out Muslim men, the use of informants in communities, things that Ahmed and I agree on. And what we had hoped to see in this summit was a set of safeguards, policy guidance that would have allowed American communities that have had these concerns to know how their concerns were going to be addressed going forward, and that would have prevented other governments, for example, from using counterterrorism strategies, as they have done, to single out or act against human rights defenders and those who present dissent. Because if we're not providing those safeguards in the United States and we're urging governments to follow our lead, then I really worry about where this is going to go.
Well, actually, I think the issues that you bring up are so important, they require, frankly, their own summit. But in terms of the focus on America, I agree with you. The extremism problem in America is minuscule compared to other places. But we're talking about a transnational phenomenon. And we're talking about empowering communities in America to come up with solutions that can be global in nature. The solutions that I'm working on through hackathons and through incubating these business ideas are meant to be global in nature, actually led by people in America who actually have more freedom and resources to be able to put these solutions in place for those of us, for those people who are actually suffering more under this extremist threat.
All right, gentlemen, Arslan is dying to get in. Just hold tight for me a minute, Ahmed. Arslan?
Yes, so absolutely. We recognize the concerns that Hina raises, and the president directly addressed them. But as Shahid was mentioning, internationally, this is an extremely important issue, and it's an extremely big problem that we are mobilizing other governments to look at civil society for solutions. The CVE programs that we have developed in the United States, the pilot projects that Ahmed was part of and that he will hopefully talk a little bit more about the LA experience, they are community-driven projects. We're not trying to insert government into this area. We believe that the communities are the ones who are best positioned to create resilience to violent extremists, resilience to these groups who are targeting members of the community and who are trying to radicalize them. We believe that they're the best, and we think that that model is one that we want to spread internationally. So that's why we had over 60 delegations coming internationally, including representatives of the United Nations, the European Union, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, so that we can talk about international solutions and how to look at this phenomenon internationally.
Sure. All right, Malika.
You talked about this being an international effort, and it has to have an international solution. So Ahmed, I know you wanted to get in. I want to pose this to you because there's a thought here on Facebook that someone wrote us. This is Marwan, and he says, Muslims of the U.S. should be delegates sent to the Muslim world to smooth the relations and ease tensions between U.S. and Muslim countries. So when we're talking about potential solutions to stemming ISIL, Al-Qaeda, is this an idea, a delegation of U.S. Muslim leaders, and why are Muslims in the U.S. the exceptional ones?
Because the Muslims of the U.S. live in freedom. They have the ability to reform their understanding of the literature that comes to define Muslim identity, because they are the most diverse group of Muslims in the world. And the phrase that I'm not hearing much in this discussion is the Muslim American community. The Muslim American community cannot engage government primarily through a lawsuit lens that makes us all litigants.
So we have lost Ahmed just there for a moment. He's frozen in mid-conversation. We'll go back.
I'll take over from.
We'll go back to him. Yeah.
Have specific grievances.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So as somebody who actually did go overseas and engage with Muslim communities around the world on behalf of not just the government but Muslim Americans, I actually have to push back on that a little bit. I don't think we're in a position to lecture people, for example, in places like Jordan and whatnot, about how to best to deal with that problem. What we can do is help empower them, help train, help provide resources, but they're the best to lead. I mean, I think we all have a place, and I don't feel like I need to go around and saying we're better than other people. We're not. We're great at solving our own problems. We should stand up and be confident about that. But we should also empower other people around the world so that they feel confident enough to stand up to these extremist threats from within their societies.
Sure. We've got Ahmed back here. Shahid, finish your sentence. I don't know if this is the way that you were going to finish your sentence. Ahmed, finish the sentence.
Folks, we are now yielding the proposition that there is a unique and exceptional experience for Islam in America with its diversity and its richness, simply because we have minor disagreements about how we engage different aspects of government pursuant to one project that has perhaps been poorly branded. We need to see this in a much more complex way. What Hina and maybe the ACLU doesn't want to appreciate is that Muslim American families are concerned about the identity formation of their young people, and they are not able alone to deal with the complexity of the realities that their young people are facing, and we need to increase the literacy of Islam.
Ahmed, that's Ahmed Yunus. He's speaking to us on a conversation we're talking about countering violent extremism and a White House summit that brought together Ahmed Yunus, Shahid Amanullah, Hina Shamsi, and also Arslan Salman. We are taking those four guests to our post show at stream.aljazeera.com, and we'll pick up the conversation there. Let me tell you about the next AJ stream, the mission to colonize Mars. We'll speak to those who are advocating for us to explore the red planet, and to a couple of people who are happy to go and live there. Until then, we'll see you online. Thanks for watching. Hello, this is the Stream's online post show. Now, we've been discussing what role Muslims can play in the White House's countering violent extremism strategy. So you heard Ahmed make his point, but you didn't hear Hina's response. Hina, go ahead.
Well, let me just say that we certainly hear from all members of the community, and we certainly understand and respect that there are many who want to provide solutions. No one wants to stand in the way of solutions. The question is, solutions to what? And as we've just talked about, this is a minuscule problem, yet a large program being rolled out in different parts of the country that, again, threatens to stigmatize American Muslims, and most importantly, does not have the kind of concrete safeguards to protect freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of belief, please let me finish, as well as the kinds of privacy safeguards that we have called for. What we heard about was mental health professionals, school professionals providing intervention and counseling to youth who are troubled. What we didn't hear about is what would stop, what are the safeguards that ensure that information about people's identity, questioning about faith, about politics and so on, isn't going to be shared with law enforcement, isn't going to be put into intelligence databases, and that we haven't.
You're preaching
Great,
to the
I'm
choir.
glad we agree.
My question to you, Hina, my question to you is, does the ACLU represent American Muslims? Do you have the agency to displace their voice? Does the whiteness of your privilege as an institution render us unable to speak for ourselves? Can we not choose a course that is distinct from yours? Are we permitted such?
I don't think it's about that. In fact, Ahmed, what I'm voicing are the concerns that I know from my clients who are American Muslims, from the years that I have spent working.
Communities?
And communities, absolutely. If you look at
the
coalitions,
ACLU represents communities?
Communities that we work with and that we are in coalitions with. If you look at our concerns that we have raised, they have been together with community members and community organizations.
Your privilege.
So Hina and Ahmed, I'm just going to push you along a little bit, because I want to make sure that we stay on track with the conversation. I hear the debate between you and I understand where both points that you're making. I want to come back to Arslan though. Arslan, as we were getting towards the end of the main show, I know you wanted to jump back in with what?
Right, well, just on this conversation as well, I just want to say that, you know, Hina and ACLU and other advocacy civil liberties groups, they do very important work and they raise very important issues which we take on in designing and implementing our program. So I definitely want to thank her and organizations like hers that do this type of important work.
I hear that your language is very conciliatory. You hear, you recognize, you understand people's concerns. So what is there something from the ACLU that now is in a CVE program that you're working on, or a project?
Well, if you take, for example, and I hope you tweet the link out, but the presentation, the video presentation by the LA delegation that was presented at the White House Summit specifically talked about how the Muslim American community in LA was concerned about how a program was being developed by the LA police. And they went to the police department, they said, these are our 5 concerns, and they were able to work with them on solutions to address those 5 concerns. That's the model of engagement that we're promoting and that we think leads to solutions and will help ensure that the law enforcement community and the Muslim American community and other communities in the United States have a healthy relationship. But the point that I wanted to make earlier dealt with the issue of human rights and our partnerships internationally. Human rights, democracy, protections for freedom of expression, protections for civil society organizations like the ACLU and others who are doing critical work, that is absolutely foundational and important, not just in our foreign policy work writ large, but specifically in terms of the CVE lens. We absolutely recognize that the long-term solution to violent extremism is to ensure that governments abide by human rights protections, that they are respecting the views of the people, and that these types of institutions and systems are being developed. In the United States, we have the benefit of having a fairly robust history of institutions developing and responding, and democratic change allowed to flourish within our country. And that's how different communities are able to really stand up and take ownership of these types of issues. So that's the type of concerns that we're also reflecting in our programming abroad.
And that video is available. You can see it down here. It's Countering Violent Extremism in Los Angeles. I'm not going to play you a clip from it now, but you can actually see it at stream.aljazeera.com. Malika.
Well, I want to play this video comment that we got, and I'd like you all to have a listen to it. This is someone who says that the conversations we're having are important, but they need to change their focus and they need to head online. So have a listen to this.
Law enforcement and government do not have the solutions. It's the communities who need to build resilience. There needs to be a space where, without fear and surveillance, so that leaders can actually talk about difficult issues. People are impacted online by this rhetoric, not at mosques or at religious institutions. The pulpit's moving away from physical spaces to virtual spaces.
So Shahid, that was from a conference participant, and I'm directing this to you, of course, because you just launched a startup incubator, which seems to be what Ali here on the video was saying we need.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? I mean, I believe that Muslim American talent and expertise can be stood up to really effectively push back against extremism, frankly, more effectively than any government could do. But in return, what government needs to do for us is give us that space and that latitude and that safety to do so. And so, I mean, Hina's comments are completely consistent with a full-throated fight against extremism. If we do CVE right, Hina and the ACLU will be happy and the government will be happy. But it's going to take a lot of work to get there. And so, I'm willing to put in the time and the effort to mobilize this talent so that we can get some real community-led and driven solutions that talk about identity and religion, the things that government can't and shouldn't talk about.
But Shahid, what does that mean in practice? I hear about it in theory, but does that mean you have a bunch of Muslims who are in a chat room countering people who say that they're with ISIL? What does that mean?
This is a much bigger issue than that. I mean, we're talking about if we cultivate a well-defined kind of broad Muslim identity that youth can gravitate to and latch onto and self-define, then I think extremism as a symptom will start to
Shahid, like your explanation makes it less easy for us to even understand. Self-define, what is it?
I'll give you
what
an
is
example.
that?
There are 8 companies that have moved into our incubator, and they cover everything from crowdfunding Muslim civic engagement projects to dating sites for Muslims to Muslim products and services for the home. I mean, it's a very broad scope of things, and so
are we talking about different kind of role models for what it means to be a Muslim American? Is that what you're not coming out and saying because you don't want to say that?
Part of it is that. I mean, look at this.
You're rebuilding a Muslim American brand that everyone can get behind. Is that what you're doing?
Mainly a young Muslim man, because we're focusing global, right? I mean, if you look at some of the appeal.
So what does this young Muslim American look like?
Well, see, if you look at the appeal of ISIS, a lot of their appeal has to be that they're very entrepreneurial, and people want to be a part of building something.
I'm not sure that's what I think about when I think about ISIS being entrepreneurial.
But if you look at they act like startups. I mean, they're building quickly. They're focusing on a small, passionate audience. They're very kind of brave about it, and we don't run that way. But if we create a base of businesses and entrepreneurship that focuses on Muslim identity, a lot of people will gravitate toward that and put their energy there.
All right. Okay. So let me see if I can make sure I understand it. Giving a new kind of young Muslim identity that is attractive and appealing, that will make people feel proud to be Muslim American.
Self-empowered. I mean, these are young Muslims creating entities and institutions for other young Muslims on a global scale that's funded, that's a for-profit initiative.
Ahmed.
I think it's important that we not talk about young Muslims as though they are people upon whom we are going to do anything. I mean, I think in rap, in comics, in startup companies, as Shahid spoke, online, in all aspects of American life, there is a rich Muslim contribution. And what we're attempting to do is to create space. Space in mosques, space outside of mosques, space in relationship with government, space online, for young Muslims to be who they want to be when they want to be it. And our job is to help them do 2 things. Know Islam better so that they can push back against arguments that say that they should kill for Islam. And number 2, know America's structure for change better so that they can know how to ameliorate the real grievances that they have. We are in agreement with the ACLU. The real grievances that they have.
For what? How are we going to do this?
No, wonderful. Like debate clubs, like Model United Nations, like internships at the ACLU, like opportunities for Muslim students to go to Washington to be a part of engagement, like sports, etc. I mean, there are so many arenas available to other American kids to fully actualize their identities. And And yet we want to deny the ability of these leaders on behalf of those kids to go to the government and say, respect our civil rights, give us a space and a voice so that we can be a part of the solution as opposed to being diagnosed as a part of the problem.
All right, Ahmed, I may be reading too much into Hina's face. It may be her resting face. She is looking politely not impressed with anything that you've said. Let me just ask you, Hina, though, we were talking about, at the beginning of the show, how else do Muslim Americans engage? How else do they come to a solution when you're looking at countering violent extremism? What else would you suggest? How should the community be used?
Well, I think some of the things that people I've talked to, people I represent, are colleague organizations on coalition letters from American Muslim communities have asked for are an end to the kinds of abuses that have caused alienation of American Muslim communities, multiple communities around the country. So President Obama said some very encouraging things at the summit last week when he talked about an end to these kinds of abuses. That in itself is a form of solution. And I think we're looking to see more than promises, we're looking to see actual action to end profiling and the use of informants, but a couple of other things that it would be very good and necessary to see that will raise, help communities to deal with their existing trust of law enforcement is actual specific safeguards and policies to ensure that the efforts that are currently underway will not be misused and abused the way that they have been. And one thing I'd like to ask Arsalan is, as we're urging these programs on other countries, what kinds of specific safeguards is perhaps the State Department seeking from DHS, from the FBI, from the Department of Justice, in order to present an example to other countries of the kinds of safeguards we're going to put into place? Are those under discussion? What is being planned?
Right. Well, the way it works is, the State Department's not going to necessarily go to the DOJ or DHS to say that you need these certain type of safeguards. The DOJ and DHS have developed those programs and policies and safeguards themselves. For a lot of these programs, they're very encouraging, and that the model of engagement between the community and the government is something that we like to showcase abroad. And so we've actually done trainings that have involved the DOJ and the DHS, as well as members of civil society from the United States. And we've shown other governments, this is how you engage with communities. You need to sit down with communities, talk to them about what problems they're facing, and help come up with solutions, collaborative solutions. And some of those trainings abroad, they were the first time that governments ever sat down with civil society within their own countries. And we had civil society internationally saying, thank you so much. This is the first time I ever sat down with government counterparts who are working on these issues. So that's the kind of model we want to portray abroad. We want to show that government can work with communities to help them become resilient to violent extremists.
Okay, so everybody, I'm going to, if I may, I know you've all got fantastic Twitter handles, and I'm going to have to wrap up the conversation now, only because at some point in the next 1 minute, the internet gets turned off for the stream. So we don't want to do that. So Arsalan, Ahmed, Shahed and Hina, thank you so much for the conversation. I encourage you to take it online and engage there. And thank you to our online community for being part of this program as well. Let me move things on to another planet, actually. Mission to colonize Mars. We'll speak to those advocating for us to explore the red planet, and to a couple of people who are quite happy to go and live in Mars. You will find out more about them on the next AJ stream. See you soon.